Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the High Stakes NASCAR Podcast. My name is Mike Bachmann. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Zach Catanzareti. And Zach, we got to see a hell of a race. Certainly one that is going to be up there with one of the best races of the year, which it seemed like at least when the race ended. Now that we're a couple of days after the checkered flag, we are able to digest it a little bit. Might not seem that way. It seems like this Bristol race a little bit more of a mixed review, but regardless, truly nothing like we've really ever seen before on the returns to the high banks, on the concrete banks of Bristol, and just an insane race, man. So, how you doing? What's your takeaway from this race? Because coming away with it was absolutely insane.
Yeah, I needed a break from staring at a TV for 3.5 solid hours because it was very similar to an Atlanta or some kind of super speedway where you really can't look away for any given point in time because the cars are just so close, and the possibility of something major happening that's pivotal to the overall race result. It can happen at any lap, and Bristol and most short tracks, you tend to kind of get into a rhythm and the cars go around and who's good. Guys going to the front, maybe guys falling back. But this one, it took everything that we know of a NASCAR race and it literally multiplied it by 5 and sometimes 10 by the end of these runs. Like it was unbelievable. I mean, we heard Chase Briscoe say, like, once they got to the end of these tire runs, it was literally like putting the difficulty of a NASCAR video game on Xbox or iRacing, whatever, and going from hard or very hard all the way down to easy. The videos were wild at the time. I know Ryan Blaney, really late in the race, he pitted and everybody was staying out because if they pit first, you're going to lose 2, 3, 4 laps at Bristol. And if somebody cuts a tire, then you're stuck 3 or 4 laps down. You're not coming back from that. So people were staying out. And there was one shot in particular, Blaney pitted, came out, and he just blew the doors off of Truex and Denny, who were still out front. It was wild. Like, it was like a completely different class of car. You can't believe it was the same thing. And the whole day was just filled with things that I can't remember seeing before, at least not consistently across 500 laps, and seeing the team scramble for tires, and the teams, or the TV was showing the wear and the cording of the tires and how many of them were in just horrible shape, and Harvick and Boy in the booth were befuddled, and the drivers didn't know what was going on. But it wasn't, it didn't get like detrimental like Indy 2008 or Texas 2022 or Bristol 2022, like where the tires were just exploding here. And Denny really spoke to it well this week, where he said the drivers got a really good warning of when the tires had enough. Like, you knew right away, one straightaway, you hit that next corner and that car just slides right up the track, and that you don't have a lot of rubber left. It's literally cording, and that's not gripping the asphalt or the concrete like rubber would. And it would last a few laps. You would see guys out there really gingerly driving around, and it got really dangerous at times because you got guys who maybe they stayed back and they conserved their tires, and now they're like 30, 40 laps of hard work of conserving your rubber that paid off for those last 10 to 15. So guys were just running completely different races, and there were times where they all converged at once. And you mentioned it, like 3 of the most not only competitive guys but the most experienced guys ended up rising to the top, and Gibbs annihilated the race again statistically, and by the finishing order. The two less experienced guys, they tended to have those issues, and they weren't able to get back to those top 4 positions. Meanwhile, Hamlin and Truex, they just led the way, and they were going through traffic perfectly. I knew it was going to get really wild at the end, but they were able to stay in a good spot to where they knew they had enough rubber to go to the end, and you had to be that type of driver to get the win. I knew that for sure.
Yeah, this was a true driver's race, man. And mentioned just the idea of like of viewing this race and with Briscoe in his in car and just watching the closing rate and the video game comparison is so true, and it's so funny because we used to do that as kids, right? And it was really just hilarious to see it in real time. But raw speed in today's NASCAR has always been super important. And I feel like tire management has become a distant memory just because we don't see the excessive fall off. And, the addition of stages certainly kind of removes a little bit of that inherent strategy when these races, certainly play out. But this was the ultimate driver test to manage tires just with how gnarly they wore out. I mean, some of those photos, man, were crazy. Seeing the cordon on the rubber and just the idea that Goodyear had to unload an additional set of tires. Like, we might not even make it to the end of this thing. So for teams to be able to adapt and understand where they're at, where they are with tires and what they need to do to conserve and try and make it to the end, was really impressive. But the craziest thing is, like, this is a same intermediate rules package, same tire compound that they've used. I think the two right sides were different, but this track just would not take any rubber at all. I mean, you would see at the top, right by the wall, all the rubber just sat on the track. It really was amazing, and I don't know exactly why this could have been. I mean, I know they put resin down instead of PJ1. Much cooler temperatures could that play a factor just because there's not enough heat in the surface? Could potentially be, but just a ridiculously entertaining race from top to bottom, and honestly something we really needed, considering that all the talk has been about horsepower, and we even talked about it last week, like why NASCAR's so reluctant and this, that, and the other thing. But you didn't hear anything about horsepower. You didn't hear anything about the package. And by the way, did we ever notice that only 5 cars finished on the lead lap? Probably. I mean, on a normal race, we'd probably be like, "What the hell is going on here? Like, this racing sucks." And probably kind of goes over our head when we're just thinking about and watching all of these comers and goers and just watching how crazy the racing was. So I don't know when we're ever going to see something like this again. And certainly interesting to hear the mixed reviews now from drivers. I mean, you had some drivers just saying that was incredibly entertaining. That was so awesome to do. You have some like Ryan Blaney comparing this style of racing to the fuel saving on super speedways, which I think is a little far-fetched because it's different. There's a total different complexion to this. Like, fuel saving is one thing, but when you have to conserve tires, like, that is so much. There's so much more at stake there, I feel like, and it makes racing that much more interesting because you have all these comers and goers, and you're not just 2 packed trains holding up the entire field by X amount of miles per hour. So Kyle Larson, he says he hopes that they never do this again, and that's coming from a guy with dirt background experience. And again, you got your former champion saying this, and you got Kyle Larson, who obviously is one of the biggest names in the sport. So I don't know kind of where we go or what's going to happen, but a hell of a return to the concrete banks. I mean, I can't believe we dumped dirt on this track over the last 3 years, honestly. Like, this was just a breath of fresh air. Great to see. I mean, a record-breaking 54 lead changes. And I know a lot of people hate that stat, but be real.
I love that stat.
What's that?
I love that stat.
Right? You have to.
Yeah. There's nothing better than lead changes. And like, you felt it too. Like, sometimes, and Denny usually doesn't like the numbers because he knows how that can kind of be deceiving on how the race actually was. But like, here you actually saw the passes for the lead. Like, you saw how guys how their different strategies of how they were running their car, how that led to lead changes. Like, some guys wanted to get out front. They were ready to push it. Other guys weren't ready and they would fall back. You had someone like Josh Berry who led early, and you look up after 10 laps and he's 19th. He fell all the way back. And I love how Harvick put it, because he said, like, he shut off because that's literally what
Yeah.
happened. As soon as they quitted, the car would shut off and stop, and now they're doing half of what they ran the lap before, and it was so dramatic. Like, you would see it immediately, and you right away knew that they cooked their tires and they didn't do it the way that they needed to. And throughout the race, like, people were learning a little bit better, but still, that was a long green flag run at the end, and I don't think anybody saw that coming. And this was all just on the fly. Like, we saw Kyle Busch pre-race, he said the top was going to come in. He's like, oh, it's going to be around the bottom for 50, 75 laps. Around lap 110, we're going to be right in the wall. Dead wrong. Had no idea. Nobody had any clue that this was how it was going to play out. We had little tastes throughout practice, but this was just this was wild. And I love when the teams are in such a corner and they have to think on their feet. You said it, like, we might not get this again, and part of that is because the teams are going to learn, and the teams are going to be able to go 50 laps without a tire issue, no problem. If we went back to Bristol on Monday, it would be a very different race, I feel. And I think for Denny Hamlin, this is going to be remembered as one of his greatest victories. I'm sure he thinks very highly of what he accomplished on Sunday. I know all the drivers are looking at him like he made it work, and even though it was we mentioned comers and goers, but he led a bunch of laps. He led the most laps. Truex was up front all day. Keselowski was. I know, Gibbs had an issue with the tire late. He still got a decent finish. Like, there were still guys who were the quickest guys, and most of them finished up front. So it wasn't just a total mixed bag of who was up front. Like, you can tell the guys who had good cars and are great short track racers, they still rose to the top, and Kyle Busch had a really bad day. It just didn't work for him. As I said pre-race, I think a lot of guys felt like something completely different was coming, and it didn't. And just going forward with all this, I don't know what NASCAR learned, what Goodyear learned. Like, they really don't know what happened. It seemed, Hamlin said it was like a happy accident because they don't know if they made a different compound without knowing it. Maybe somebody, tipped over something in the big vat that they, mixed this rubber in. Blaney doesn't think it was the same compound. He's sure that something had to be different. Was it the resin? I think that may be a part of it. But when they're running why wouldn't the high side come in? Like, why wouldn't the rubber stick outside of that? It's a real wonder on what happened. We're all really happy it did. We went from like a 1 on tire wear to where these things never fall off at all. We saw it just last week. And then we get all the way to a 9 or a 10 here. And I would love to find like a 7 or 8. Yeah. Because this was a big step in the right direction. I just think we stepped over it a little bit, and I would love to kind of reel it back. But this was way better than what we've seen over the last couple of years.
Yeah, these guys, I mean, they were on edge as they've ever been, and it's all about balance, right? Like, we want to see drivers, and we want to see the strategy play in our favor as fans, right? Because that makes the race that much more interesting. And again, just like the complaint of today's NASCAR, we don't get this virtually at all anymore. So it is kind of hilarious that this just fell into our laps, I feel like, because nobody had any expectations, and to call it a happy accident is just like the perfect way to frame it, because nobody had any idea what was going to happen. And here we go. We got an absolute barn burner of a race. And for Denny Hamlin, like you said, to go back to back at Bristol, despite the comers and goers and kind of the unpredictability of who was going to be there, you have those veterans that have experience running these type of races from years past, and they were able to make it work on that final long green flag run. And they're there standing on the podium with Hamlin, Truex, and Keselowski. But even with the chaotic nature of how this race played out, Toyota still at the top, dominated. I mean, lead to over 75% of the laps, and just flexing again on short tracking. Really impressive stuff. And you mentioned his name, but Ty Gibbs, Ty Gibbs, man. Story of the day. Certainly had the best car for the majority of it. I mean, swept both stages. But again, when we stayed green, that number 54 faded because he got everything out of his tires to get back up front. I remember that might have been the last pit stop where he put the scuffs on and drove all the way up, and then just fell because he was done. He shut off, which I agree. Loved how Harvick was able to kind of say that, shut the car, nailed, like literally did, because there's nothing you can do. So again, when you don't have the experience of conservative tires like that, you're gonna fall back. But Gibbs continues to, I mean, look like he's looked like one of the best to start the year, if not the most consistent, maybe the best. His sophomore surge is for real, and it's really awesome to see. Because again, we talk about the rookies and whatnot, and how long it takes for them to really find their footing and become competitive on a week-to-week basis. And Ty in year 2 has been able to really show that this year. So I'm excited for him. I think it's great. We want to see these young drivers able to compete with the best of the best, especially these veterans. And, you know, for a team like Joe Gibbs, they've got 4 really good cars this year. So probably going to be a lot more checkered flags they're going to be taking home. So finishes 9th, still gets his 4th top 10 of the year. And you mentioned RFK, Brad Keselowski rounding out the podium. Chris Buescher able to come back and finish 7th. Found this stat on Brad per Trey Ryan on Twitter or X. This is the first time he scored back-to-back top 5 since Talladega in Kansas at the spring of 21. That's crazy, dude.
That's surprising. Right?
Yeah, it seems like I know he hasn't won, but feels like he's been at least good enough to do that. Over the last,
it's not like
maybe last year. It's just wild.
Yeah, it's not like he's far off from that. I think that was just chance. He must have had like a 5th and a 6th back-to-back or something.
Yeah. Had to just be like right off of it, but still crazy.
Right.
And I believe that was the his last win back in 2021. So Dega 2021. So hey, again, good to see these guys put together good finishes and do well. And then Hendrick Motorsports able to survive. They were able to place 3 cars in the top 10, but man, the speed is still clearly not there at Chevrolet. I mean, there was outside of Kyle Larson, who was able to rebound nicely. He was really the one Chevy that was basically a top 10 car for most of the day. Alex Bowman comes home 4th, which is really nice for him. And Chase Elliott was, he was running up there, but fell back because he was fighting some electrical issues, I believe. So nice to see salvage a top 10, but speed is still not there for Chevrolet. They have to be concerned with where they stack up right now, because again, we're going to be going to a lot of these tracks over the next couple of weeks. And Toyota looks like they're going to just absolutely rake and take home a lot more hardware as we continue to get there. So going to be interesting to see what Chevy is able to do to kind of rebound and show their stuff in. But just some crazy stuff. And shout out John Hunter Nemechek for 6th place. Yeah. Really good day for him. He was comfortably inside the top 10 for much of it. So good for John Hunter. And it's another Toyota. Like the riches are being spread across all the Toyotas. Because Legacy MC certainly has shown a little bit more speed than I think, we were certainly hoping for. After last year, they certainly needed something to get this team pointed in the right direction. So Zach, just a crazy race, but what are your final thoughts there?
Yeah, but specifically with John Hunter, like I think a lot of people were looking at his teammate for the most part. I know last week we mentioned Eric Jones because he's done tremendously well there no matter what series he's running. And I look right past John Hunter, even though he showed some promise at Phoenix, it really didn't come together for him like it did for Eric earlier. But then, Eric ended up getting kind of bullied out of the way, and neither of them got a good run. Most people were talking about, John Hunter and Joey, and them getting together. And that's not what you want at this point in the season. You want to be storming out of the gate and showing people that this is working, especially with a new manufacturer. And when the rest of Toyota, at least the vast majority, definitely the leaders of Toyota with Gibbs, with them completely destroying the field, back-to-back weeks now on these type of style of tracks. They're really different, and different packages as well. But I think it's able to showcase what the car is capable of, once you get to these tracks where it's just slow down, speed up, and you're just going around, and the competition tends to be a lot closer. If you have an issue, you're completely done, because the track is so small. It's not like, COTA this weekend where you can make a green flag pit stop and you're half a lap down, maybe, it just completely changes the complexity of what you do on pit road. And if you do have an issue, or if you do have, a tire going down, or if you're just behind on your setup, it's far greater when you have that at Bristol, because you're 3 or 4 laps down and you're done just like that. I mean, Byron didn't really have a massive impact with the wall. Like, he just had a small kind of brush up against it, and he had to pit, and he was 1 lap down. I think he got back on the lead lap, and then he had to make a green flag stop, I believe, and he was 6 down before we knew it. And he had some of the most the fastest laps of the race. He ran 30 fastest laps, which I think was the 3rd most of any driver. So you look at somebody who has a really solid car, and they just have one little incident, and it's just not something you can come back from. So with Gibbs and having all 4 guys up front, literally 1, 2, 3, 4, significantly, for it wasn't just one restart where they ended up there by accident on a choose. Like, they ran there. And having Gibbs, he's the one who I was looking at this year, because we really don't know how rookie guys go into their 2nd year, and are they able to build upon what they learned, or are they just gonna, have what Austin Cindric had last year, and it just doesn't. We never talk about him at all, and it's actually a downward spiral. We call it a sophomore slump for a reason. A lot of guys have them. Kyle Larson had it, back in 2015. A lot of people forget he stormed onto the scene in 2014. He didn't win, but he did everything but. And then the following year, literally the last race of the season at Homestead, that was his best run of the year. And we're not seeing that from Gibbs right now, and that's got to make him feel good to not be the weak link. When your 3 teammates are just competitive as they've ever been, just as a trio. And for him to join that and to be the most consistent guy of the entire series through now 5 races, it's just each week it's kind of growing and growing, and that stat's getting more and more impressive to look at. That win's going to come. I don't see it, being 99 to 100 races like it was for Elliott and Byron and Larson. I think it's going to be any week now. It could be Richmond and Martinsville. He would be really good picks for one of those races.
Yeah, for sure. It's great to see. And for Ty, especially after leaving the Unity Series and kind of where his career was there. And I feel like just the public perception of him, as a driver, and kind of the way he races, and getting that rookie year under his belt, certainly being able to mature, learn the next gen car, learn, from team. I mean, he's got the 2 veterans in Hamlin and Truex, who are as good as really they've ever been, they continue to be. Truex maybe not, but we know how consistent he is and good he is in the regular season, especially after last year. And then Christopher Bell, who is the quiet championship threats every single year, and deserves to be looked at, rightfully so. So Ty is certainly in a great situation. And you're right, that win is going to come very soon. Could happen at Richmond, could happen at Martinsville. I mean, it could happen. It's probably not going to happen because there's so many good road course racers at COTA. But Ty's a sneaky one, man. He's a sneaky one. So it's going to be fun to watch him and see if he can just continue this ride of consistency and translate it into wins. But really impressed with that 54 team to begin the year. So I want to just shout out the fans. because, dude, this has been a dream start for the year. I feel like you
Yeah.
have the 3 wide photo finish at Atlanta. You have, the battle between Kyle Larson and Tyler Reddick at Las Vegas at the end of that race. You have Kyle Busch driving backwards again. So funny how every time it seems like Kyle Busch is just driving backwards again. It's like the fourth or fifth time where he's done, and it's just like, here he goes again.
Oh, it's probably like closer to 10 times actually. Like he started doing it like the mid 2010s, I think. He does it
Dude,
almost once every single year. Like I wasn't impressed anymore. I'm like, yep, here he goes.
It's just it's just so funny.
It is.
But you get that, and you get the Bristol race straight out of 1985. I mean, it's as old school as it gets. So just an absolute great time to be a fan. And for all of the fans that are watching as a result of the Netflix documentary and are just getting started this year, like, it has been a real dream start. So if you're not paying attention, you have to start paying attention, because there's going to be a little stretch with COTA, the first road course race, see how that pans out, and then of course the short tracks to follow going into April. But we're really setting ourselves up here for a really great season, and to see what we've seen is just awesome, dude. Like, I'm so fired up for just how this start has really transpired, and just the different things we're getting. Like, I feel like it's not just one story. We're getting multiple different things to talk about every single week, and it's made for great racing. So shout out to the fans, because it's a great time to be a fan right now, and it's been a hell of a start to see 5 races in. So COTA is going to be interesting, but for now, I mean, we got to take it in, because this is some of the best racing we've seen in a while. I mean, certainly in the next gen. I think.
Yeah, I always enjoy the opening races of a season, because everything does seem fresh, even for for people who've covered the sport or followed the sport for decades. It's always just you get that feeling in Daytona, but you after a few weeks it kind of blends in, and you're like, okay, we're into the regular season, the kind of meat and potatoes of what we have and all that. But I feel like these 5 races have been 5 completely different races, and I love that NASCAR has so much to offer. I love that it's not the same race twice, in back-to-back weeks. You get so many different types of tracks, a lot of guys who are able to show different type of racecraft. You go to Daytona and Atlanta, then you have those long green flag runs out of Phoenix at a flat track and a 1.5 miles, and now whatever you call Sunday, that just showed a totally different side of what these guys are capable of. I said I can't believe nobody had a spin in those last 100 laps or so that it went green, and I think that's something that only Cup drivers can do. I think if you put any drivers in that situation, they're just not equipped to hold their car underneath them and feel what the car is telling them. You have to be very educated with the lower half of your body to know what your car is telling you, and just them showcasing that skill. I think that's the biggest thing that the sport needs, because it's all about the drivers, it's all about the cars. Kamui Kobayashi, he had a pre-race press conference. Of course, he's running his second Cup race this weekend in COTA, and he said, like, with the Japanese fans, like, they love the sound of the cars, right? It's all about the sound and the feeling that you feel when you're sitting in the grandstands, and the reverb from the stands comes up and it hits your body. And he said that NASCAR right now is the best sounding race car in the world. And he's heard pretty much everything. He's heard open wheel cars. He's heard the GT, and sports cars and all that. And he said NASCAR is that brings the power unlike anything else. And that's a huge thing. Competitively, the sport's off to a fantastic start. We've had 5 different winners with 5 different types of backgrounds, I feel. And it's bleeding into the Trucks and Xfinity series. I've been liking how they're getting started, but it's all about Cup, and because they lead the way for every single other series in NASCAR. There's like 10 or 15 NASCAR series around the entire world, Brazil, Mexico, Canada. And, the Cup Series that's what everyone looks at first. And they should. It's the number one series. But when they're bringing the competition and bringing the storylines and the compelling nature of every race being different, that's what's most important. And COTA's going to be a 6th race now. That's going to be totally different for whoever's watching.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that the point that you made about the drivers being able to showcase this talent is super important, because these are NASCAR drivers. Like, these are some of the best drivers in the world. And I feel like that often gets overlooked or taken for granted just because of the stereotypes, how outsiders view NASCAR inherently. We have to remember that, these guys, they put their lives on the line every single weekend, despite how safe these cars are. And they are as talented as anybody else out there. Like, it is hard to drive a stock car, and it is hard to do what these guys did. And for them to be able to understand where they're at, and for them to be able to adapt like they do throughout the race, like, it's super important, from a team standpoint, to be able to do that. And it's not just driver, it's crew chief and it's spotter. It's the whole deal, dude. And for the drivers to finally be able to, again, just show a little bit more than just simply raw speed, that's what we needed. And I hope that that's a little eye-opening to the average fan, especially with how it was portrayed by the broadcast, how difficult it was and how unpredictable it was, and coming into the race with no expectation, and this is how it is, right? That's super important. And I hope that just, stamps a little respect on these drivers, because I feel like that gets often overlooked, in today's NASCAR, especially with the idea of this next gen car and how, we're outsourcing. It's basically the same car for every team, built exactly the same. So, it's all about the driver now. It really is. And that talent is going to, be ahead of the next guy, and just help things along. So, hope that's able to, I hope that fans are able to, respect these drivers a little bit more, because I do feel like that gets often overlooked today.
Yeah. And they saw it on Sunday, like visually. Sometimes it's hard to understand like what drivers are battling behind the wheel, but a race like Sunday, you can just sit back and you can just see like, oh, that guy, his car is completely undrivable. And that's why he's 15 miles an hour behind the pace. And now these guys are flying around the outside. Oh, they're pushing it. They're going for it. Fox did a good job with Clint and Kevin, because they're pretty recent drivers. So they know what that's like out there. But that was an easy job for them. I feel like when a race is that wild and that much is happening and that much the average fan can literally see with their eyes and they know what's happening. That's really tough to get across all motorsports, because nobody's, I've driven race cars a couple times, but like most people, they don't know what that feeling is like out there. So it is hard to have that connection to what these guys are battling out there and how physical it is and how important the tires are, because no matter what they do with aerodynamics and whatever they do with mechanical grip and all this, there's only one thing connecting that car to the track. It's connecting the car to this earth is those tires. Yeah. And that's the number one important thing. If those tires aren't right, the race car does not matter. The race car is going to flip upside down and hit the wall, because you need the tires. So when you see that part on full display across an entire race, it was compelling, and that's what it seems like people enjoyed most from that event.
Yeah, 100%. Hopefully it filters into this weekend at COTA. Certainly going to be a different race. So we'll I'm excited. I'm a fan of road course racing. I know that it's been experimented with, over the last couple of years with trying to figure out, the way to put on the race and format it. But I am a fan of road course racing. I enjoy the unique nature of it. And, it's just another level for these guys, to add to their arsenal, because, when years ago you used to have all these veteran guys, all these road course ringers come in and wipe the floor, or at least compete with these NASCAR drivers. Road course racing has become almost like it's become a standard. Like, if you can't race on a road course, you're going to be so far behind. Like because there's so many different road courses we go to now. And it's so much more common. Like you have to be able to have that skill. And it's like the days of the road course ringers are more gone than they used to be, just because there's so many drivers that can win on a road course now and that can run up front. So we're going to talk about some of those guys, but I want to just talk about Team Penske real quick before we get into COTA, because Team Penske, not named Ryan Blaney, is they haven't been really doing so hot the last couple of weeks, and I'm deeply concerned about my Joey Logano comeback tour. He's got an average finish of 25th through 5 races. He's now hit the 1-year mark on his winless streak, and it just seems like outside of qualifying, this team has got no speed whatsoever. I mean, Austin Cindric, now 3 consecutive finishes of 29th or worse. He's a great road course racer. He's pretty solid at COTA last year, so it could be a bright spot for him to try and at least put that number 2 in the right direction. But I feel like the beginning of the season, we were talking about Penske on these super speedways. I mean, they brought a lot of really good speed at Las Vegas, even though they kind of fell off. We talk about teams we're concerned with. Ryan Blaney's kind of not in the question because he is so consistent. And yeah, he fell off at Bristol, but he was at least running in the top 10 for much of the day and contending. Where do you think this team is at? Like, where do you think Logano goes from here? Cindric, not terribly interested in, but Logano himself, like it has not been good for this 22 team. And they are in a serious point hole right now.
They are. And once you start getting more and more races under your belt, that point gap's not going to improve, especially if he doesn't improve. And now you're talking like, is he going to have to win to make the playoffs? Like we know these last few years, he hasn't been a huge winner like he was, a number of years ago. Last year, he just had the 1, and that came early in the year at Atlanta, which is, a super speedway type of race. And he won that on the last lap. I did not expect this at all from him. I knew one of the big storylines coming into the year was Ryan Blaney and if he can take over that number 1 status on that team. And I thought he had a pretty good shot at that. Did not think it was going to be this apparent, like that. Joey's 26th in points, and Ryan, I believe, is 4th. You look at every single statistical category outside of qualifying. Joey's been bringing it on Fridays and Saturdays, but on Sunday it's like a totally different car, and Joey's not behind the wheel. I don't know if they're switching out a driver halfway through the race or what's happening, because he's not the 2-time champ that I've seen. And they said like it's his worst start to a year since his rookie year, which was 15 years ago. And it's, especially when he joined Penske, that was just such that was a rebrand for him as a driver. And it showed it showed all that buildup that he was having through, K&N and ARCA, getting into Xfinity, and he was thrown right into Cup. Like, it wasn't the right team, wasn't the right, time for him. But once he got a few years under his belt and 2013 hit, we just saw a whole new driver. And, it's been over 10 years now, and he's had amazing success. He's great in the playoffs, great in the summer surge, but he's also great in the beginning of the year. But this year, it's been very different. And it's not always just him getting caught up in an accident. He does get in accidents, but he's usually not running well when he gets in an accident, I know Daytona, that would have been, looking back now, that was very pivotal. If he avoided that accident, he was looking really strong for that. But outside of that, it's just been one issue after another. And I don't know where it gets turned around. I know it's overall not like an overall Ford issue. I mean, they're not killing it. But RFK are quickly turning around these last couple weeks. And we spoke about Blaney and how great he's been. He's really close to having multiple wins already this year. So I think it's just there's certain guys who they just can't get onto a roll, and it just compounds week after week. And before you know it, we have a handful of races and you're in a big time hole, and you're looking back like, what happened? How do we get here? And how do we turn this around? Because now we got the High Stakes NASCAR Podcast trashing us, telling us that we're in a hole. You know how that happened. How that happened. You know, me and Blaney are supposed to be at the top here. You know, and yeah, he's in a really tough spot. I don't know how it gets turned around, but he's got the experience to not let it get to his head. I don't think he's going to go out there and be thinking about last week. I think he gets over stuff fairly well. He's usually the one in the past who has started issues with people, and he's the one who moves on first, right? And I think he's the same when things go bad or when things go great. He's able to just bring the right stuff to the next week. So I don't know what happens from here, but I'm at that concern level because there's just no bright spots outside of qualifying sessions.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, there's a lot of season left, and you know, Joey is a 2-time champion, so he's got a veteran team, and he knows how to get it done. But he's certainly going to have to find some speed. I don't think it's going to happen this weekend at COTA, but there's certainly time to point this thing in the right direction and try and get some points. Like, you just got to try and get some points at this rate and put together some consistent finishes. So we'll see where that 22 team is. I mean, happy for Blaney that he is leading the charge now. Because again, I feel like he often gets overlooked despite how consistent he typically is. And being the defending champion, you know, you certainly want to be that guy at your race team. If not like a 1A, 1B between him and Joey. But still, you know, the Blaney fan like that, I'm happy to see him run well and contend on a week-to-week basis. And I think it just goes to show where both, you know, drivers and teams are at when you look at Blaney and Logano and just where they are to start the season. So a lot of time still, but you know, we'll have to see where it goes. So with all that in consideration, what do you say we do a little preview of COTA?
Yes, sir. And to start the previews, you know how this works. We got a little bit of trivia, and yeah, COTA's an interesting track. I think this one question I have for you for this week's trivia, it's more about road course racing in general. We know a lot of guys who've killed road courses in their careers, but only one driver has won at more than 3 road courses. So that driver, he's active. And my question is, what is the driver and what road courses did he win at?
Oh boy. That's a great question. So I gotta pick the driver first. I have no idea if I'm gonna get the tracks, but he's won on 3 different tracks. I'm trying to
couple more.
So
he's won at 5.
Chase. He's won at 5.
5.
Whoa.
Yeah, the next closest was 3, and he's won 5.
Wow. So I obviously think Chase, because he's got 7 total.
Yes.
I don't even know. I don't even know who would be like the next closest, because Reddick has 3.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the easy answer, I just want to go chalk and say Chase.
Yes.
Just because of the amount of wins, because all of the wins he's got. Where has he won?
Yeah.
He won at Watkins Glen for his first win.
Mm-hmm.
He's done it at COTA, I believe. Mm-hmm. He's won at Road America. I miss Road America so much.
Yeah.
Wish we still raced there. I don't think he's won at Sonoma. I want to say Indy. He's won at.
He has not won Indy.
So what am I? Oh, he's Charlotte Roval.
Yep. And then one more.
So what's the track I'm missing? COTA, Charlotte. Watkins
it is
Glen,
tough to forget because it had a short
and
run.
Road America. Not Indy. I don't know. I think
It's another.
Did he win at Daytona? Is it
He
Daytona
did.
Road Course?
That's it.
Oh,
Yep.
wow.
I was about to say it's another oval that has an infield road course.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's tough to forget because it had such a short run. They ran the Clash there, and then they had a point race there. So
yeah. Was that Christopher Bell's first win? He won at Daytona Road.
That was the second race of the year.
Yeah.
That season. Yeah.
Yeah, Daytona. Wow.
Yeah, I was surprised when I looked at the list of winners. You had a lot of guys winning at 2 or 3, and then Chase's won at 5. And of course, some of that is like the timing, right? Like we think of NASCAR in the 2010s here, just a big road course bloom. And I think one year we had 7 road courses. Now we're down to 5. But if you were to have a Gordon or a Stewart running today, they would have double-digit wins because they don't just have Sonoma and Watkins Glen. They just had 2 every single year, and they were still able to rack up 8 or 9 wins, which is pretty insane given that each year you just had 2 chances, and then you restart to a new season, and then you're able to do it again and again and again. But yeah, you definitely can't overlook Chase's record, 3rd all time, and to do it at 5 different tracks with the competition as close as it is, that was really impressive. And he's a really good pick this weekend.
Yeah, he didn't run the race last year because he was sidelined due to injury. But I do want to I want to ask you this. So if you could pick this weekend between Tyler Reddick, Chase Elliott, or the field, who would you feel more comfortable taking this weekend? Would you take Reddick or Elliott? Package deal, or would you take the field?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Because Reddick at the betting market, so Reddick is opened at plus 450. Chase Elliott is plus 800. Shane Van Gisbergen toss out the window. Like I talk about him on my Xfinity show every week and toss that 9-1 out the window. That's not happening. And again, these are odds on DraftKings Sportsbook, but if you are going to bet, be sure to shop around, find your best lines because, more times than not, there are a lot of discrepancies in the market. So make sure that you're shopping different sports books and looking for the best lines. We're just using DraftKings odds for purposes here. And it is Reddick and Chase at the top. So would you take one of those two, or would you take the field this weekend?
I think I may take the field. I don't have the feeling for Reddick, at least. I know he's got really good numbers there at COTA as the defending winner. That race was unbelievably wild, but he was one of the consistents who ran up front. The year prior, Chastain bumped him out of the lead with 2 laps to go, so he could have won that one. But I don't know. Yeah, oh yeah. I just don't feel like they have that 45 underneath him at this point. I mean, he's had some really good runs this year, don't get me wrong, but you can't have a pit road issue in this race. And because track position is going to be so important, it is, there's a lot of passing opportunities, but the track is just so massively long. And I guess I'm just not feeling it for the 45, and Chase has really good numbers there. He won under rain shortened circumstances that first year. I don't know how much you kind of take that into account, but he had another top 5 there the following year. But there's too many good road course guys. Like we mentioned it, a couple minutes ago. There's just too many guys who know how to get around it and get the job done. Chastain's the only guy to have 3 straight top 5s at COTA in all 3 races, and 3 very, very different races. Bowman's run super well there. He's coming off a good run, for what that's worth. McDowell, he's shown more road course potential than Cindric, which kind of surprised me. But of the road courses, I think COTA would be Cindric's best bet to have a good run. Ty Gibbs, he doesn't have the good results, but his average finish is one of the one of the best at Circuit of the Americas. You toss in Kyle Busch and maybe these Roush Fenwick Keselowski duo there. Maybe a Blaney who's shown potential at road courses. He's got to win. There's just too many guys who I'm looking at. I feel like it's just too tight to put your bets on two guys, but those are two really good guys to look at. But I would put to the field if that was on me.
Yeah, I'm with on the field. Because again, I just feel like the talent pool is just so deep, and it's so tough, paying steep price like a 4.5 for a Tyler Reddick. Even though I'm not surprised to see him open that short, similarly Chase at 8-1. Again, like these numbers are going to move as the week goes on and as the money comes in. So some of these guys get shorter, some of these guys might get longer, but it's like I look at a Ross Chastain at plus 1,200. Like you said, 3 straight top fives, including that win a couple of years ago. And look, I think Ross, he shows his capability and he's not afraid to be aggressive, right? And he's been able to figure it out at COTA. Not only him, but even like Daniel Suarez. Like Daniel Suarez is a sneaky little road course racer, won at Sonoma a couple of years ago. He's been decent here at COTA. But for a guy like Ross, who always puts himself in the right position at the right time and has, just been probably the best statistically on this track since we've gone here. He's a guy that I like a lot this weekend. You mentioned Alex Bowman, another driver. He's priced around 25-1 this weekend. I think that Alex is going to be an interesting guy to look at as well, because he's got an 8th place finish. He's got the runner-up finish in 22 and then a 3rd place last year. So again, you look at the position that Chev is in back on that short track package, like how much is that going to really hurt them, because they didn't show anything at Phoenix. Obviously it's a road course, it's different complexion type of race. But you look at these two guys, Ross and Alex, and I think, where they're currently priced, I certainly think that there's advantage there to get after them. I want to throw William Byron's name in the hat as well, because, last year he finishes 5th, and, especially after last week and kind of just the throwaway performance that it was, because he just got caught up in early stuff and able to, get himself back. I think that the 24 is going to be able to unload fast. Next to Reddick last year, Byron kind of the next best man in that race. So I think in looking at him, had the best average finish on road courses last year was Byron. So he's certainly a guy that I'm going to be looking at, and I think is a safe bet as well. The RFK guys, not particularly interested in Brad Keselowski this week, but Chris Buescher, we know, has certainly developed into a really good road course racer. I know COTA is probably his worst of the tracks that he has been to on road courses, but Buescher is certainly going to be a threat, I think, to run well and really show his stuff. And I think Christopher Bell too is going to be sneaky this weekend. Might not be sneaky just with the where this team has been, but the results haven't been great for him. He's been in accidents in 2 of the 3 races we've been at, but the one he was able to finish, he placed 3rd. So in looking at Christopher Bell, this team is on fire. It's going to continue, and I would certainly look at Christopher Bell as another one of those drivers, that could potentially throw his hat there, because all the eyes would be on Chase and Reddick. I'm very interested to see, what SVG does. What are your expectations for SVG? Because yes, he comes in, he does it. He wins Chicago, he wipes the floor. But these types of road courses are so much more different, I feel like, than racing on the streets of Chicago. And I do think there is a learning curve for a driver as talented as he is, and for as impressive as it was to come in and do what he did at Chicago. I just think that these road courses are a little bit of a different beast. So what is your expectation on SVG this weekend? Like, he's going to be a top 10 guy? I mean, I feel like the public perception is just so overhyped in a sense. And again, I talk about him on my Xfinity show every single week, and I'm very curious to see where he opens on the Xfinity side of things. But I just feel like he is being looked at way too heavily when we just don't have the sample. And I really do think that there is a very big difference on these road courses, these drivers, and give them the respect that they can do really well on road courses, in comparison to Chicago. So give me your read on SVG. What are we doing here?
My read is pretty good. I don't I think I don't see him winning. But I think it's very similar to how we looked at him for the Indy Grand Prix last year. I think that was a good sample size on what he's really capable of. Like, we've only run that track, a few years, but it's a few years that he didn't have. So he was a little bit behind there, as opposed to a Chicago where it was a first time for everybody. And he's one of the very, very, very few who's run a lot of racetracks like that, where you're right by the wall. Indy kind of tested him in a way that Chicago didn't, and he had a solid run that day. He was able to bring it home in the top 10, and I think that's all I wanted to see. Like, if he was in the top 15, top half, stays out of trouble, shows that he knows how to maneuver the car around guys who aren't as quick as him, and he's able to kind of balance what you see from a short track or a place like Chicago, where it's just a very different type of racing animal. Now you're on a track that has wide open lanes, and you really have a lot of options, with where you want to put your car versus where everyone else is. And I think COTA is going to be an interesting challenge for him. I think him running Xfinity is going to be a big help. It's giving him that extra leg up on whatever Cup guys on also running that race. He's been off to a great start in Xfinity, with 2 top 10s already, 3rd at Atlanta, 6th at Phoenix. And he doesn't necessarily run there, but as we know in this sport, it's not always where you run, it's how you execute and how you get to the end. There are too many guys who run super well and they don't finish well. We see it in all the series. There's always that one guy. And for him to really be blowing the doors off Josh Williams, his teammate in Xfinity, I did not see that coming. I thought Josh, with all of his stock car experience, I thought he would be the one, getting these finishes and running and qualifying well. And none of those pieces have been there. And I think that's just that transition from mid-pack equipment to top tier. That is a tough transition. But, with Shane, I think this can be a really good weekend. I am definitely thinking top 10 on Sunday. For Xfinity, I would be surprised if he's not top 5, contending for the win. I really think he's capable of good things. He's in a tremendous car that's had great road course success, with good teammates as well. But I think that extra track time, that's something that he really needs. He's been learning ovals in a big way this year. We know Daytona didn't go well, but the other ones, I think Vegas, he kind of had an engine issue and didn't get that track time that he needed. But with practice, across 2 series and 2 big races, he's going to grow a lot as a NASCAR driver after this weekend. And I think he started from such a high point. He didn't have to come in and learn and kind of show what he can do. Like, he owned this series. Everybody was talking about him. He was the number 1 story for a long time, even after that, just because of all the viewership and just how massive of a cultural event that was for NASCAR. Now it was the opposite. Now it's kind of bringing him down to like what we can expect from him going forward. And just with him off to such a great start this year, now we're going to something that he's more comfortable with left and right turns. I would just put my expectations and bring him up a few notches, because we know he he can do good things when he's with the proper people and in the right position.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. That is definitely fair. It'd be good to get some additional track time and see kind of what that does for him. I'm more interested in AJ Allmendinger, honestly. Like, if you look at
Sure.
both of those call-it guys, I mean, you can't overlook AJ. Was fifth here in 2021. He was, I believe, he was part of that final lap,
He was,
scrap
yeah.
between Ross and Alex, and then he was running top 5 for most of last year's race before getting into a late race accident. So these opportunities for AJ, he's obviously won in the next gen on a road course before. So despite being part-time again, like, he's the driver that you're going to look at for these opportunities, to get somebody different. And AJ is as good as they come. He is always a safe bet. He is as good as Reddick and Chase on these road courses. It's just with him being part-time now, his name doesn't come up as much, but definitely am interested to see where AJ unloads. But if you're looking at both of those guys, like, I am much more interested in AJ Allmendinger than SVG. But look, he's got a great teammate to learn from on these more traditional road courses in NASCAR. So that's obviously going to do some wonders for him. But yeah, I like AJ this weekend. I do think, all things considered, and I don't know, like, I love the position that Toyota is in, and I really want to take Christopher Bell this weekend. Again, like, I just think that with the momentum and the confidence, him just kind of doing his thing, just being there, putting together these good finishes, like, I think the confidence is as high as ever, and the sky is the limit for this 20 team this year. And when he was able to finish these races, he's put together a good finish. So I think Christopher Bell is gonna win this weekend. I'm gonna pick him to go to be the first driver to put 2 on the board in the win category this year. But I'm staring at Ross, man. I just feel like one of these days it's gonna happen. This could be as good of a day as ever, but I'm going to stick my gut. I'm going to take Christopher Bell to win this weekend.
You mentioned my guy there. I think I have to go with Ross here. I feel COTA is it's a place of finesse. You have to know how to dial your car in and take it easy, but it's also a track where you attack. Like, there's a lot of corners here where it's all about who breaks last, and sometimes you got to use people up. Sometimes they slide up, and left-hand turns become right-hand turns. You're in the right lane, but now it's a left-hand turn, and now you're on the disadvantage. And just tracks that just move like that, I feel like really capture what we know about Ross. We've seen it on every type of racetrack. He's willing to go for the hole, even if it's maybe not all the way there. He still goes for it, and there's certain corners at COTA that I think just fit him perfectly. The last few corners, there's a long right-hander where it's just all about, just kind of rolling the car through. And there's like 3 or 4 kind of apexes. You see the curbing kind of come out a little bit. And then you hit those last 2 left-handers. And it's just a track that I think fits him really well. The numbers kind of prove that. And it hasn't been the best start to a year for him. I think him and Suarez, I think they want to have a good run, because with Daniel, it's been Atlanta was a huge victory, but we know how close that was to just being a 3rd place finish, which still would have been good, but we really wouldn't be looking at that as, he's off to a great start. Like, you got to bring the results in the weeks that follow. And Suarez has run really well on road courses as well. He ran tremendously well. It was either last year or 2022, and I think both of them are capable of being the top 2 best guys. The pool is really, really deep on road courses, as we mentioned, but with Voss, this is just his type of track. I think of all the road courses we hit, this is the one that fits him the best. And I'm going to go with Ross here. I feel pretty confident he can bring it home.
Yeah, I like it. I think Ross is a good pick this weekend. I would certainly look at, again, I think Alex Bowman at his current number is there's some value to be had there. You mentioned Daniel Suarez. Yeah, last year he was exceptional. Didn't have the finish to show for it, just with all that late race chaos that ensued. Felt like the race was never going to end, but it did. And yeah, road course racer for the first time this year. I'm really curious to see what we do, and hopefully we can just continue the momentum from Bristol and just the beginning of this year, and we can put together a good race, because I know we've got stage breaks once again, cautions this year. So that experiment lasted 1 year and looks like back to stage cautions. So very interested to see what the narrative is there, what the conversation is surrounding that, because I'm sure it's going to be another one of those bipolar things where you have people that love it, people that hate it. We're going to be wanting no stage breaks, and then when we don't get stage breaks, now the race is boring, and it is what it is. But we'll get stage cautions, so we'll get these guys racked a couple of times if it does get strung out. So that should hopefully create for some good racing. And we know that hairpin turn is just like ridiculous to just send it in there on lap one. So should be a fun one, Zach. But that's all we got. Why don't you let the people know what you're working on this week?
Yeah, well, the original plan was I was going to COTA, but those plans were kind of moved around. Yeah, I was. I was pretty close to going, but kind of chose to focus on the short track stuff. So I'll be in Richmond and Martinsville these next 2 weeks, but sitting at home at COTA. And I went there last year. I was up on the top of the I forget what they call it, the Needle or something, 200 feet up, incredible view, unbelievable place to watch a race and to shoot all throughout the corners. It's absolutely beautiful. Wish I was going, but definitely really excited to watch it from afar. Win for a hell of a race, and I'm going to be cutting the extended highlight instead on Sunday. So I'm glad NBC is utilizing me. There's nothing more I want to do on a Sunday than work the race, even if I'm not there. So Motorsports on NBC YouTube channel, going to have that for you. Of course, we got IndyCar this weekend with the Thermal Club and that $1 million deal. Dude. So a lot of exciting stuff this week, but I'm looking. Sunday's obviously number one in my book. So tune in for that. And you'll see all the best stuff from NBC and all the motorsports. Yeah,
NBCsports.com, Motorsports on NBC YouTube channel, all the written editorial coming out this week from Dustin and John Newby. And yeah, man, you mentioned IndyCar. The $1 million challenge is going to be be sweet. That I am very fascinated to see. It's a big event. It's crazy. That IndyCar season, just how it's formatted. Like, we got this, and then the next point paying race isn't until like almost the end of April, I feel like. So many long breaks. But to go from St. Peter's to do this exhibition at Thermal is going to be sweet. I'm really excited for it. So we'll have that, which I'll be working on Sunday. Obviously Supercross is in Seattle this weekend, so they're back West Coast for a couple of weeks, which should be really exciting. Jet Lawrence's championship to lose. I mean, he has been everything that we expected. So pretty awesome to watch, and he really is a serious rising star right now. I mean, he already is a star. But just I'm seeing him back it up every single week and take these guys to school. So a lot of exciting stuff as always coming out of Motorsports on NBC. You can follow me on Twitter at MV Bachmann. I'll have the Xfinity betting preview up for COTA this week after have a week off, and excited to handicap that race and break it down for you. So, Zach, as always, it's a pleasure doing this with you. Be sure to check us out on YouTube. We'll have clips from the full show out during the week, full show out on Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts, which will be out shortly after this recording. So, Zach, appreciate you. Thanks as always. Let's get it on here in COTA, and we'll be back next week to break it all down.